Hello and welcome to the Manifest to Live Life Golden Show. I have a special bonus episode today that I'm really excited to share with you. I have my friend Maria Finch here. She is an inner intelligence coach. She is the podcaster for the Silence the Mind Clock. And we found each other. You know, the universe brought us together. And I did a little interview with Maria on her show recently. And I just thought she is just the perfect person to bring to you guys the information about training your mind and really becoming someone who has more joy in life, who understands how to live life from a place of connection and integration and really putting our best feet forward. So, welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Golden. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's so good. You know, it's so good when we connect with people and we find these connections like from across the country, right?
Yeah,
Where are you located? You're pretty far from me.
I am. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, which is just outside of DC.
Love it. Love it. So you're on the
Yeah,
East Coast, I'm on the West Coast,
yeah.
and the universe brought us together, right?
It did indeed, and I'm so grateful.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about what your podcast is about and how you kind of bring people to this, like what's a mind clock, first of all?
Okay, so first of all, mind cluck is a euphemism. So it means exactly what you might think it means. It's the G rated version. And I believe
I
that,
love it.
yeah. So I believe that everybody on the planet experiences mind cluck throughout every day. And learning how to, number one, understand your mind cluck, recognize your thoughts as mind cluck, and then figure out what are the messages in your mind cluck. Sometimes there are important things you can learn. Sometimes it's a matter of training yourself to silence that mind cluck because it might derail you in a situation where you want to be really present and conscious and everything else. And so silencing mind cluck, it's about silencing multiple layers. Some layers are easier than others, but I think everything in life is easier when you don't have the voice in your mind saying, you can't do this, you're not good enough, this isn't going to work, all of that. So
Yeah,
I am all about training the mind to reduce those kinds of messages.
love it. I call that the shitty committee.
There you go. Yeah, good. That's a good name.
Yeah, we want to move away from the shitty committee, and helping people to understand like where that voice comes from and being able to have enough space
Mhm.
to separate themselves from that voice because that voice
Right.
feels like us, right? But it's not.
Exactly. I mean, I think one of the things that's so challenging about Mind Cluck for everyone is that it always sounds true. It sounds like facts. You think,
Mhm.
my mind is telling me I can't do this, and that must be true. But when you get really good at paying attention to your own thoughts, you can call out Mind Cluck. So you could be like, hmm,
Mm.
I think that's Mind Cluck. Let's revisit that. Let's actually say, okay, you're telling me I can't complete this project, whatever, just as an example. So then you say, well, is that actually true? Can I not complete this project? If I can't complete this project, why not? Do I have a choice here? So you just start to go down to actually question the thought to begin with, because you may find that it's totally false. And you'll be like, yeah, I don't have to have the stress of feeling I can't get this done because I absolutely can.
Yeah. And it usually is false, right? I mean,
So often.
all the time. There's so much
Yeah.
false
Yeah.
information going on and ways that our mind keeps us safe and tries to keep us the same. So it's going to give us every reason why we can't get things done or why we're afraid to do something out of our comfort zone. So that's why it's good to question kind of everything that's going on and saying, is this really true for me? I love that.
Yeah. So is it really true? Another really good question to ask yourself is this something I really want to be thinking?
Good.
So if you're thinking, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or this isn't going to work for me, do you really want to think that?
Hmm.
And if hopefully the answer is no. And if the answer is no, the next question becomes, well, what would you rather think? So I would rather think I'm going to kick ass on this project. Just taking the project example.
It's so much more empowering to think that way, and you can feel the shifts when you go from, fretting and being anxious to I'm going to kick ass at this thing. There's a complete shift in that thinking, and what it does is it inspires energy then to start
Yeah.
to deliver to you the ways in which you can do that. So that is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you empower yourself, you give yourself energy and you give yourself some momentum. I often talk about it as we've all got all these boulders around us. So picture like a big boulder, and you got to get the boulder in motion. So the boulder can block you, or you can say, "No, you know what? I don't want that. So I'm going to push on this boulder and I'm going to get it in motion." And then the beautiful thing is physics will take over and motion begets motion. So sometimes the key with Mind Cluck is just getting your mind started in another direction and then going with it. So you put that boulder in motion and you go with it. And before you know it, you're giving yourself energy and power to accomplish whatever goal you might have, be that a small goal or a bigger goal.
That is so true. There's a I always talk about the book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art, and it's all about creativity and the blocks that we hit when we're
Mm-hmm.
going into creativity. So I love the boulder analogy because when you think about going to do something that's different or out of your comfort zone or,
Mm-hmm.
part of allowing higher consciousness to be in your expression, there is so much resistance because your mind is going to
Sure.
be like, hey, hang on a second. Like, we're supposed to be worried about things. We're supposed to be working on problems, not creating amazing things. So I love the idea of the boulder. And I always say energy begets energy. Like
Yeah.
once you overcome that initial resistance, that momentum will start to take over and your action will always take you out of doubt.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, if for scientists who are listening, it's like, it's physics. You
Yeah.
put physics into play, motion begets motion, energy begets energy. So I think one of the most important things, though, is choice. Like, you can choose to do this.
Yes.
So you can choose to stay in your comfort zone and wish things were different.
Mhm.
Or you can say, I'm going to choose to step out and to push that boulder forward and see what gets unveiled.
I love that. I always say misery, like the misery of staying the same is way worse than the misery of working through the fear. Like,
Oh,
you're never going
yeah.
to regret moving forward. You're only going to regret staying the same. So I love that. That's so great. So what are some of the first of all, how did you get interested in mind training? I'm curious about like what started the foundation of that for you.
So, really, the foundation for me began when I was like a teenager, and it was trying to make sense of some of my childhood experience that had been very difficult.
Mhm.
And that's when I started to really recognize, like, oh, wow, I've got some beliefs that really limit me because based on my own experience, like, I created beliefs that enabled me
Right.
to survive whatever the circumstances were that I was in. But those same beliefs then became really limiting
Mhm.
in what I could in my perspective, in how I would look at the world and my experience in it. And so I began working on that from a pretty young
That's
age.
amazing.
And yeah, and then over time, it just became something that became more and more important to me. And as I aged, then I did more formal things to really address my own mind cluck and then to start to build my own philosophy around it.
Love it.
And so, doing a lot of inner work myself, and then also doing inner work with other people and really understanding that there is so much choice in what we think about things and choosing the filter through which we
Mm.
interpret what is happening to us, around us, etc. And I feel like lately I'm paying a lot of attention to the filter that I use in any situation, and that is very, very powerful.
It's key because it's the beginning of your momentum. So, like, if you can change
Mhm.
the filter, I always say excitement and anxiety is the same energy. It's just the filter you throw it through. So that's what
Yeah.
determines what it becomes next. So if you can start with the filter, then you get to choose what happens next because you've gotten it at the foundation. So I just want to like step back a little bit because it's really interesting that you say you started as a teenager looking at survival belief systems because
Uh-huh.
that's what happens as children. We set ourselves up with, we're in survival mode a lot of the times
Mhm.
for a lot of us that, step through traumas and things like that.
Mhm.
So many people operate at these like 5-year-old belief systems and these
Yeah.
belief systems when they weren't safe. So
Right.
that's what tends to keep people in that lack and limitation is that they don't realize even that they're living by young belief systems, but also other people's belief systems. So I
Yeah.
love that you started early. What can you say to people that are dealing with the negative emotions that are coming up and the mind stuff that has to do with survival mode? Like, do you have a process that you go through as far as, I feel like both of us are kind of far into this process already in
Yeah.
life,
It's
because we've
true.
been doing our shit
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so like, let's say one of your clients, it's like a beginner type situation where they're like just for the first time starting to go, oh, hang on a second, I don't have to choose this anymore. What would you say to people who maybe are revisiting negative emotion a lot and having some trouble processing?
I think the first thing is to validate your own emotion. So if you're feeling bad about something, that gives you really important information.
Mm,
And that becomes a place to explore. So you don't have to shy away from a negative emotion. Instead, you can look into it and say, what's the root of this?
mm,
What belief is attached to this negative emotion? And that's like a very gentle way to get started because you're not trying to transform anything. You're simply being curious. And you're saying, so for example, say you're in a work situation and you find that when you're around certain people in this work situation, you get very intimidated and then
mhm,
you get very tense and then you feel like you're not as articulate as you could be, or maybe you misstep in some way. Well, and then you feel bad. So it's
yep.
like, okay, well, I feel bad about what happened at work today. Okay, well, who was involved? At what point in that interaction did you feel your stomach clench? What
Mm,
exactly was happening? And then you start to unravel where where does this really come from? And this can take a bit of time, but just by being curious, you start to open up the possibility of maybe I don't have to think this way.
mm,
Maybe what I'm experiencing is an old feedback loop that's just having me react in a certain way, even though there's a part of me that's looking at myself and saying, why am I reacting like this?
yeah.
So it all just becomes, it's almost like guideposts or signs. There's signs like road signs saying, hey, wait a minute, what's going on there? Would you like to shift this in some way? So if you start paying attention to when you get your stomach clenched, then you can start to say, okay, why is that happening? And then that gives you a gateway into getting rid of a limiting belief.
That's great. And it's that curiosity and that going within and asking those questions that unveils that for people. That's
Mhm.
very similar to the process that I use. Absolutely. What was I going to say about the idea that, when you're faced with something and it's like brings you to this place of trigger, right? You have this
Mhm.
emotional reaction to it and then you start to feel bad. None of us were ever taught that emotions, first of all, were valid or good, right?
Right, right,
Are rude,
exactly.
told not to cry, put in timeout, right?
Yeah.
So just acknowledging that you have an emotional field instead of, running to alcohol or running to shopping or running to the TV or scrolling social media, you sit down and take that time. And every single person has the time to do this. We've just kind of been programmed that we're too busy to pay attention to ourselves. But when you create that foundation of a relationship with yourself, instead of, running to therapy or running to a friend, or, and we love to do that because we love to connect and resonate and see what other people think. But the relationship with self is so necessary to getting the answers for yourself. And I feel like a good therapist, that's basically what they do, is they just ask you questions to get yourself clear with yourself, if they're doing it correctly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I believe therapists, coaches, mentors, all of these people, they should be guiding you back to you.
Yes.
It's not them imposing their beliefs on you, it's them helping you uncover your own and uncover your own limiting beliefs. Like all of those answers are within.
Totally.
No one can meet with you and say, "Oh, here's your
Yeah.
limiting belief."
Yeah.
They can meet with you and they can say, "Let me ask you a bunch of questions." And then they can say, "Gosh, do you think you believe such and such?" And you might say, "No, that's not my belief at all." But anyone worth their salt is going to have you figure it out. You're
Right.
just, they are there as a support and a guide and, a sounding board and all of those things. I think, I think that I love what you said about having a relationship with yourself. I think this is something that is very much not promoted in our society, because our society is like, race against everything all the time and don't really focus on your emotions because you don't really have time for those and those are stupid anyway. And I'm the total opposite camp. I'm
Yeah.
like, every day you can take a few minutes, and I call it sit and stare time. Where you
Yeah.
just sit, ask yourself how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Something will go through your mind and you can think, "Gosh, I got really upset about that," or "That made me really angry," or whatever. That's useful information.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it gets you connected to basically your vibration. Like what your
Mhm.
mood is your vibration, and that vibration is the energy that you're sending out. So to get really connected to what am I feeling right now? I have a group coaching group that I'm doing, and I have them putting note cards all over their house. Like, what am I thinking right now?
Uh-huh.
What am I focused on? What am I
Uh-huh.
feeling? Just to get the awareness. And the awareness is always just the first step. Like, I remember a long time ago having the awareness that I didn't want to yell at my kids anymore. This was like, I just started my meditation practice. I was probably in my early 30s. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, I don't want to yell at them anymore. And like being above my yelling self, still yelling. Like, I have no idea how to get a handle of this. And it would take me a while of being committed to meditation, and not just that, but getting in touch with, why am I so upset? And the base of all of it, and I think the
Mhm.
base of a lot of our negative emotion, is we feel powerless. Like we don't feel like we have control over our lives. And then we have these little beings running around that are running the roost. We're like, I have no
Yeah,
control
totally. I
over
mean,
anything.
yeah, totally. One of the things that I think becomes very interesting is that as you start to tune in more and more with yourself, and you start to bring the curiosity and say, "Okay, why am I reacting in this particular way in this particular situation?" And as you start to strengthen your own empowerment, your own sense of self, and you start to let go of limiting beliefs, it then becomes very easy to see when somebody is operating from their 5-year-old self.
Yeah.
And you can see it every day where people will react to things and you think, "Wow,
Yeah.
that was impressive." And you think, "Gosh, I wonder if they've ever wondered, why this particular situation set them off." And and it just helps you understand, like, everybody experiences this. This is part of the human condition, and everyone is at somewhere on this continuum of understanding. Where do they come from and why, and what level of consciousness do they really want to operate on? And it's different for everybody. Some people are super into this. Some people are like, "Nope, I just, I'm that's not my thing." And that's okay.
Well, and it's great to think about that in the terms of not taking anything personally, because if we are all on a journey and we're all in different places on our journey, some people are going to be awake and ready for this stuff and other people are just they're not there yet. So knowing that and knowing that everybody
Yeah.
has their own work to do, the only part of it that we ever need to really take personally is the stuff that's triggering us. And that's when we have that invitation to look within. Otherwise, it's like, well, that's a you problem. And I'm going to stay over
Yeah.
here in
Well,
my own little world and not really worry about what's going on with you because that's not really my work, right?
right. The other thing is that you become able to be like sort of a a person of solidity so
Mhm,
that people can react around you and you say, okay. And
mhm.
instead of judging what's happening to them, you bring compassion instead and you think, gosh, they're having a hard day because of who knows what. And so I'm just going to stand here and be present and be as kind and gentle as I can be and let them do what they need to do without attaching myself to it.
That is a game changer. That probably was the best information ever on this podcast. That's a complete game changer because you're not exchanging energy. You're not dropping your vibration
Mhm.
to theirs. You're not allowing a wound to be triggered by them. That's just going to really we always say it's not a teaching moment when everybody's yelling at each other. Like it's no progress is being made when you're doing this. Like maybe it feels good,
Absolutely.
because you're like letting
Yeah.
it all out, but it's really
Yeah.
not a great way to communicate. It's not a great way to help people heal. So I loved what you said, just giving them space and holding them in a place of compassion and non-judgment. That's mastery.
Mhm.
That's freaking I'm not even there yet with a lot of things. I'll be honest. I have
I
4 daughters. I'm not
I
there yet.
I have moments when I can get there. I mean,
Yeah.
I am not there all like I my goal is to be there as much of the time as I possibly can be, but of course as a human, like I go in and out of it too. So there are times when I'm like right there and they're like, "Ugh." And
Yeah.
other times I can sit back and be like, gosh, I might do this in my mind. So somebody's flipping out and in my mind I'll be thinking, I'm sending you a big hug. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. It is going to be okay, and I'm just going to be here and be steady.
Yeah, and just give the space. And I think the secret and the key to that and being in that element more is, keeping our vibrations high and keeping ourselves taken care of, where we are
Yeah.
committed to our meditation practice, right? And we're being very
Mhm.
present and aware from a moment to moment basis.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think of it as, you kind of have your own resources, the things that give you comfort, that make you feel secure, that make you feel empowered. And the more that you can draw on those when you're in a tricky situation, the easier it is to stay steady. And sometimes it's impossible, and
Yes.
that's also okay. We're
Yeah,
all
it's also
human. You get
right.
to flip out with anyone you want to.
It's still part of our expansion and growth, right? And it's
Yeah.
even part of, like, I think about my daughters, I'm like, it's part of their expansion and growth too, to see that I'm not perfect, that I do have
Absolutely.
my
Yeah.
own processes. And I also think that if we just deal with the stuff as it comes up, instead of being like, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for this, and then letting our life reflect a bunch of it to us until we don't have a choice but to look at it.
Mhm.
So it's like
Mhm.
dealing with it as it comes up, as time consuming as that may feel. I really try to do the work when it's there for me to do instead of just brushing it off until it's so awful that I'm just let that's where rage I think comes from, is when we let this buildup happen and we don't
Yeah.
acknowledge our daily feelings. My favorite saying right now is life is relentless. And it's so funny because it may not sound very positive, but first of all, people they really relate to it. It's like, yes, life is relentless. It's never going to stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is, doing the work every day is a moment to moment thing. We can't,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's like you can't just be lazy and like whatever and just it's just one of those things where I don't know, I feel extremely committed to, okay, where's the up level today?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Where am I going today?
Yeah, well, and for people listening who maybe haven't even begun this journey,
Yeah.
it's I think if you just start with curiosity and start with curiosity and withhold judgment.
Mhm.
So you might, like, I think anyone can say, gosh, I'm so stupid. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Whatever.
Yeah.
You can try and withhold that and instead be like, wow, that really upset me. Why? Or that made me really angry. Why? There's a place to start. And you can do that in a millisecond. You know,
Yeah.
you can do that while you're still in an interaction with someone where you're flipping out. You could be like, gosh, look at me. What's
Yeah.
going on here?
Yeah. So true. Because that's going to give you a window into what needs to be looked at and healed.
Yeah. And I think for many people, having a trusted person to help you do this definitely enables you to go further faster.
Yeah.
I know that's not for everybody, but for anyone who's interested, that is a way to do it. So you get someone who is skilled at reflecting you back to you.
Yeah, and
So
I
it's,
totally agree with that because we have
yeah.
blind spots. I've worked with
Oh,
energy
yeah.
healers for years, and it
Hmm.
wasn't because I needed somebody to tell me what to do. I needed somebody to
Right.
tell me what I was missing.
Yeah,
Where's the blind
absolutely.
spot? Where is my leading edge? Where am I growing? And what do I
Hmm.
need to make this journey the most optimal experience where I'm not getting stuck in things and I'm not feeling, because I feel like that shitty committee is so crafty. It's so
Oh, yeah.
manipulative and it so works on just keeping you in the same place. So if you don't have any outside awareness of that or inside awareness of that, a person, who's really skilled in this will ask the right questions to kind of shift you out of that place
Absolutely.
of stuckness. Like we're never stuck. I tell people, they're like, I'm so stuck. I'm like, you're never stuck. Like energy is always moving. So
Right.
yeah. And I
Right.
think the
And
stuckness is people think like they haven't grown because they forget to look at where they came from.
well, and also I think that when you feel stuck, it's your mind telling you that you don't have options, but you always have options. The
Always.
only time you stop having options is when you're dead.
Right.
Until you're dead,
And then
you
there might be
always,
options. We don't even
yeah,
know.
no, that's true. That's
There might
true.
even be
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. We could go way down a rabbit hole there,
It's
but we'll save that. But yeah, but so in any situation, you always have options and
totally.
you always have another way to experience whatever you're in.
Yeah.
It can be monumentally difficult to remember that in a difficult moment.
Yeah. True.
but
Yep.
but if you just tell yourself, if you start having your own sort of mantra in your mind of I always have options. I always have
I
options.
love that.
It changes how you're going to look at things
Yes.
because instead of coming to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. You're going to be like, no, I always have options.
Yes.
What are they? It
Yes.
makes you curious. You're always trying to spark the curiosity. So if I always have options, where are they? What are they? Who are they? And
Yes.
then you start problem solving and then you're in motion again.
I love that. I love
Keeping
the
that boulder going.
yes, and I love the inquiry because, I think one of the things that happens to us is when we get into these, neural loops, we get into these loops that we've had over time. And
Mhm.
when we continue to play the same loops, we continue to attract the same things. So that's how people like create cycles in their life. But when you start to inquire and you start asking yourself, like, why is this way? And why do I believe this? We get to a point where we start to transform energy because we're opening up into
Mhm.
solution instead of
Mhm.
consistently being in a loop of a problem. So,
Right.
one of my favorite things to tell people is, you don't have enough information yet. Like when you're faced
Yeah.
with a problem,
Mhm.
you got to step back and you have to allow the energy field to tell you what the right direction to go is. But everyone's trying to figure it out too fast, right? Because we're a fast moving society.
Right.
You got to give answers, people pressure us. And it's like the universe never pressures. So it's taking that step back and it's saying, all right, I have to look at all of the options. And then, bless you,
Excuse me.
no worries.
Thank
Look at all of the options and then decide and let the energy field show me where the path of least resistance is. So I think people
Mhm.
they get crazy because they want to figure things out. Like as soon as we're faced with a problem, we're like, oh my God, I got to figure it out. That's the mind.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That's the mind. And when we
Right.
just chill out and we take a deep breath and we give our self time to meditate and quiet the mind, all
Mhm.
of a sudden we're going to get intuitions and inspirations that we probably didn't originally think of. And then boom, before you know it, the energy is moving in the direction of what you really wanted.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that came to mind as you were saying that is that for anyone who's listening to this and thinking meditation, like, I don't want to sit on a cushion in the lotus position, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There are a million different ways to meditate.
True.
So for me, I think of meditation, you can expand your definition of meditation. So meditation can be any activity that you do that engages your mind in a way that's relaxed so
Mm.
that your thoughts flow.
Ah, I love
And
that.
when your thoughts are flowing, you're in a form of meditation. So
Yes.
one of the things that always works for me is cleaning. And people always
Mm.
say, "Oh, that makes me mad because I hate cleaning." And I'm like, "I love cleaning
Love it.
because I start cleaning and my mind relaxes. And then it's almost like you can watch thoughts go by. I'll often solve problems because
Mhm.
I relax my mind and I let it come to me as
Love
opposed
that.
to seeking. That's another thing that's really powerful is actually letting the answers come to you.
Yes. Yes.
That's when you really tune into that inner intelligence and you listen as opposed to seeking.
Love it. And I always have, shower inspirations. Like when you're in
Mhm,
the shower,
mhm.
that's a really good example of like
Absolutely.
when you're just doing something and you're not really like you're relaxed. And I always wondered what that was about, but I was thinking it was because there was no outside distractions. But the idea that your mind is relaxed is super brilliant. And I always feel like creativity, I'm really inspiring the world to be more creative. I'm asking
Mhm.
people questions like I was talking to, my massage therapist the other day. I met the most amazing woman. And I said to her, she said she used to be a sculptor. And I said, so
Oh.
where did that go? And she was like, oh, I don't really have space in my apartment. And she goes, but I could make space. And I said, you've got to get back to that because our
Oh, yeah.
creative energy is life flow. And so
Mhm.
that idea of meditation while creating, you're
Mhm.
getting behind the monkey mind and the anxiety, and you're actually settling yourself into a creative flow, I think that it unveils a lot of a joyful life experience, a more joyful life experience where you're not just going to work and paying the bills and dealing with the kids and
Right.
all of that, right?
Right. And creativity can take all different kinds of forms. So it could be actual some kind of art project. It could be athletics. It could be cooking.
Totally.
There's so many different ways that we create. And so I just think with all of these things, it's like expand your definitions because that
Yes.
that just opens up options. It all comes down to options.
I love that. I have so many women in my life, like as we, get into our 50s and 60s, I have so many women that are like, I hate cooking. And it's so funny for me
Mm.
to be like, I love cooking. And they're like, what? Like, aren't you over it by now? I'm like, no, because it's creation. For
Yeah.
me to
Yeah.
like look in my refrigerator and design a meal, I get all sorts of inspirations and throw stuff together. And my family's like,
Hmm.
this is amazing. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, if you approach cooking from that standpoint and
Hmm.
what can I feed my body with the healthiest, most
Right.
beautiful colors, then
Right.
it changes the element and then cooking becomes a meditation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love to cook,
Mhm.
and um, I will find myself. It's cooking relaxes my mind. Like
Totally.
that's the best way to say it. It's
Same.
like I
Yep.
start cooking, and I'm focused on how am I going to mix these things together? What spices am I going to use?
Yes.
Measuring or not measuring, following a recipe or being creative, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's just a way you're focused on something, and so your mind
I
relaxes.
love that. I never thought of it that way, and it's expression. I always feel like cooking is
Mhm.
expression. So I put
Oh
music
yeah.
on, I dance in the kitchen, and I get like and it's like I don't have to do anything else right now. That's also what I love about it, like when I'm chopping up vegetables and it's like
Yeah.
I don't have to be figuring out problems. I don't have to be doing anything else except being here now, and it's some of my most I don't know, my most grateful moments during the day, honestly.
Yeah, I just it can be just so relaxing to just be focused on, okay, I'm going to cut this way, and while you're doing that, you're not thinking about email and
So
texts
true.
and everything else,
Like a
it
blink.
all just
Yes.
goes away. It all just
Yes.
goes away. Like anything that you do in your life that enables everything else to go away is a form of meditation.
Oh, I love that. So one of the other things that I share, in quantum physics, meditation is
Hmm.
considered zero state awareness. So I like to help people to kind of get away from the word meditation because it has so much
Hmm.
connotation, right? A lot of people think I
It
can't
does.
meditate, my mind is crazy. I was talking
Yeah.
to somebody recently that said he was trying to meditate and there was a squirrel on the outside of his door, and I said that was like an analogy for your mind, And I was like, your mind is out of control until you take the control back. So,
Yeah.
when people first start the process of quieting their mind, do you have any tips for your clients or for my audience on, what do they do when the mind starts kicking up? Because I feel like you might have some different processes to share.
Sure. Well, so first I want to tell you that mind cluck, I literally think of it as clucking chickens. So you
Yes.
think of like chickens just going crazy in your head. And what I want instead is I want an owl brain. So quiet. Owls don't make any sound, like they're muffled with feathers so that they hunt efficiently. They can spin their heads around 360 degrees. So think of going from clucking chickens to I can see 360 degrees and I'm quiet.
I love that. Love
So
it.
just like, so first, just kind of putting that in your mind, it's like a really easy visual to grab a hold of. And then I think, again, with anything, it all begins with awareness.
Yes.
So part of it is observing yourself. So you could do this over a few days and just notice, when is your mind relaxed?
Mm,
When does your mind just kind of, when do your thoughts just flow in a natural way and you're not you're not getting tense?
mhm.
It's almost, it's a version of daydreaming, but it's more, uh perhaps more productive than just like sort of random daydreams.
Mhm.
And by noticing that you do already do that, then you can start to tune into, how do you feel when that happens?
Mm.
And what are you actually doing while it happens?
Ah.
And then adding more of that to your life.
I love that. So your philosophy is people are already doing this. They just don't know it.
I believe that everybody does, because I think otherwise we would all be dead
You'd be
or
dead.
murderers or whatever, because it would be unbearable. It
It's
would
like
be absolutely unbearable.
it's like in Japan. So have you ever watched the movie Happy?
I haven't,
Okay,
no.
it's great. So it's narrated by Marcy Shimoff, which is one of the contributors to The Secret. And they basically, it's a
Oh, okay.
documentary, and they went around to all these different places in the world and found the happiest people. And
Mm.
interestingly, they weren't the wealthiest people.
Hmm.
And what they found is, and I forget what it's called, but in Japan, people are dying from being overworked. So
Hmm.
interesting. So
Hmm.
it's true that if we just, have this life that is so full of anxiety and stress and pressure, that we'll get sick. I mean, it's obvious,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that
So
happens to everybody. Yeah.
totally. But I love the idea of people looking at their lives and being like, okay, where do I already do this? Because that gives
Hmm.
them evidence that it can be done and expanded upon. Brilliant.
Right. And it also helps them start to tune into the feeling.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of having a quiet mind is just recognizing, how do I feel when my mind is quiet? So perhaps your mind gets really quiet when you're petting your dog or your cat, because that's like a
Hmm.
very soothing activity. And then you can say, okay, so this is the feeling that I get. And then you start to expand on it and you start to add it into your day more. So maybe that means you pet your dog or your cat more. Maybe it
Yes.
means if you get that feeling when you're cooking, then you make sure that you're cooking more.
Yes.
So first it's just starting to add that in. Another thing though that I think is so important is really questioning what your mind is telling you. And so if you start to feel like, oh my gosh, the chickens in my brain are just going nuts, you
Yep.
got to pay attention to that.
You
If
totally
you,
do.
yeah, when you start paying attention to it, just by starting to pay attention to it, you'll reduce how much it happens, because you'll be thinking, why are these chickens going wild in my brain again? Like, let's not do that. So I think so much about quieting the mind begins with awareness. So it's awareness of when your mind is already quiet,
Yep.
and then it's awareness of when your mind isn't and what's going on that's contributing to that.
I love that. And one of the reasons I connected with you is because my grandfather had chickens. So
Oh, right. Yeah, we talked about
so he had
that.
this barn of 10,000 chickens, and you
Yeah.
weren't allowed to walk in there with red on. Red would make them go crazy. So when you think about this is such an interesting thing to think about. When you think about, when your mind is going crazy or when you're angry, like the color red is all
Mhm.
about being in those super intense emotions.
Mhm.
So that is really interesting that chickens would connect with that. So pay attention.
Yeah.
I love the idea of just paying attention to it's just becoming more aware. It doesn't mean you're going to change a lot, but becoming more aware and getting to know yourself better is going to help you to navigate life in a different perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And also, it's going to most likely make you curious because
Yeah.
you're going to be like, well, I really like how I feel when I'm petting my dog or my cat. And I
Yes.
don't really like it when I go to work and I'm in one a meeting with this one particular person and I want to
Yes.
punch the walls. Like,
Yes.
how do I bring my dog or my cat feeling to work? Like, what
Totally.
would what would enable me to experience that in a different way? Then you
Yes.
get curious, and then that helps you start to go a bit deeper to understand, like, okay, maybe I could do this in a different way.
Yeah.
Because you can do it in a different way in other settings. So,
Yes.
how do you bring that calm elsewhere?
How do I take that with me? I love
Mhm.
that. And I often meditate with a cat on my lap, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Animals are the best.
They
They're the best.
are. They just give you that, like, warm, cozy feeling, and it's presence, right? Animals are always present. So they're a great indicator to us that that presence is available to us, and anytime we wanna turn towards that, we have the ability to do it. It's just
Yeah,
creating enough
absolutely.
space. Like, we just gotta get enough space in there to go, "Okay, hold on a second. I don't necessarily want to feel this way about work anymore. I wanna feel better about work. How
Right,
can I?" That's when you
right.
start unleashing the answers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better about work, about a relationship, about a transition in life, going for, like moving, doing whatever you might do. I kind of feel like life is full of all these big transition points. So, and those often come with tons of mind cluck
Yes.
because you're making some kind of change.
Yeah.
And so, but recognizing that you do have the ability to go through those things in a different way,
Totally.
it can inspire you to actually work on getting there.
It's
And
so
not that it's,
true.
none of us are perfect, so
No.
this is always a
Yeah.
up and down thing and everyone goes in and out of it, but I just look at it as like, how do you spend more of your time in life feeling calm and confident
I
and
love that.
centered?
Yes,
Yeah.
centered, and I would add satisfied. I love the feeling of
Yeah.
satisfaction because it doesn't ask
Yeah.
people to go from, depression to joy. It's like satisfaction
Right.
allows you to be in a frequency where more things that are satisfying can come to you. So I
Mhm.
recently had to change gyms, and I had been with the same gym for almost 3 years and went there
Mhm.
almost every single day of my life and
Wow.
had friends, and it was home. It was my home away from
Yeah.
home. And the whole thing just kind of fell apart, and I had to join a new gym. And my mantra was change is good. And that's the
Mhm.
mantra that I took with me every time I felt anxious, every time I
Mhm.
had to, like, be on equipment I didn't know how to use and be out of my comfort zone. I just kept saying change is good. And this gym has completely changed my life in such a
Wow.
my whole family, because now we're all going together, and I'm like, that's why, it's easy to stay safe in the same. I could have stayed at that other gym,
Mhm.
but I didn't like what happened there. So I felt like I had to leave, but, it would have been easier to stay there for sure.
Sure.
But it would
Sure.
not have been as satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about going for satisfaction because I totally satisfaction, fulfillment, all of those things, and that is a kind of wealth that is immeasurable. And
Absolutely.
going for that kind of wealth in life is really worthwhile because it makes all of the pesky, annoying things that we all deal with all the time a lot quieter.
It
I mean,
does.
I think of all of that as noise.
Yes.
Sometimes that noise is really loud and it consumes you, and you think this person cut me off and this barista got my order wrong, and I broke my nail or whatever it is, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
But being able to be like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna go with the flow.
Yeah, I'm
That
gonna let
person cut
those
me
things
off.
go.
Maybe they're
Yep,
having a bad day. That's
yep.
okay.
Yep. We have a saying around our house, first world problems, just to keep ourselves
Hmm.
grounded. Like this is first world problem and we need to just like take a step back, gain some perspective and let it go because if we let it go and we don't allow like so many times I've seen and I've definitely been guilty of this myself where it's like something happens like somebody cuts you off or something happens in the morning that's not fantastic and you feel compelled to share it with everyone. So you're basically dragging that terrible moment around with you and you're handing it to everyone that you're talking to. And then you're just reverberating that vibration. So by taking a step back and going, all right, well, what is good right now? What is satisfying to me right now? You can shift a lot easier. I use music a lot. I love music. I love nature. I use those things, meditation, to just shift out of what I say is a disc. Like sometimes I watch my daughter wake up and there's a dog barking and the dog will wake her up and then she'll just be on a disc. And yesterday I said, oh,
Uh,
she's on a disc, like she's on a spinning disc and it's just getting worse. I don't need to jump on that disc, right? I need to like just maybe inspire her to get on a different disc, but it's not my job to hop on that disc with her and then let my day go down the shitter, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, well, and I think in our society, people are so afraid of negative emotion, but negative
yes,
emotion serves a purpose. And actually, like expressing it is very important because otherwise you're sticking it in your
very
cells and
true.
it'll
Yep.
build up and burst out at a really inconvenient time. And so when you're sad, be sad. When you're mad, be mad, and then move on,
And
you
connect with it.
know?
Exactly. Connect with it and
Yeah.
see what it has to tell you. I say that about pain as well, pain in the body. Ask the
Hmm.
pain what it wants you to know, ask your neck why it's so tight and tense and stressed and find out what it needs you to know so that it can settle down and not be causing you to focus on it so much. I think a lot of times people will get diagnosed with things or they'll be in pain and they'll just continually focus upon it as pain and as something powerless that they can't do anything about. So I think when we really take that step back and say, what can I do about this and what does this want me to know, any emotion, any pain, anything going on in your life, you're just going to get a window into something that will allow things to heal and grow and shift.
Yeah, I mean, and that just it's curiosity. Bring
Totally.
curiosity.
I
So you
love
can be
that.
like, "Wow, I woke up this morning and I am in a bad mood." Then you can say, "Oh, okay. Well, so first of all, you want to give yourself some comfort and say, "Gosh, that's a bummer. That's too bad that I've woken up that way." But then it's like, "Hmm, well, what's that about?" And if you become curious, like your mood's going to change right away because instead
Totally.
of being angry, you're curious.
I love that. Shit, and that's a different disc, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. That is a really, really wonderful way to just deal with emotions as they come up. So it's not like, okay, I got to sit down, I got to journal, I got to figure this out. It's just like, what's that about? I love that.
Yeah, and you can do that in the moment because then you don't have to sit down and journal and
Totally.
everything. Like, and the truth is, when you ask yourself a question like that and you tune into your inner intelligence, you're gonna get the correct
Oh,
answer.
completely, completely. It was funny. I went to a sound healing recently. It was like a yoga sound healing thing, and it wasn't optimal. Like it wasn't what I liked, and there was a lot of things going on that I didn't like, and it felt very chaotic. So I was telling my friends about it, and I realized that I drove there in the rain. I hydroplaned one or two times. I had to
Oh,
park on the PCH, which is a very busy road. I had to do
yeah,
a U-turn. I had to do a lot of things. So I thought about it and I said, wow, I was walking in there feeling
yeah,
pretty chaotic. So
yeah,
that was a mirror and a reflection to me of, okay, you got to check your energy before you walk into places like that if you want the energy to
yeah.
really settle you and bring you some peace. So we are always conducting energy, it is always reflecting from us. And I love that. I love that because the world is our window into our very own souls. And because of
Mhm.
that, we have a lot of control over what's happening.
Yeah, well, and I think another thing when you were talking about reflection, another thing that brought to mind is that people reflect us back to us often. I mean,
Totally.
all the time.
Yep.
And sometimes people's reflections are inaccurate,
Mm,
and their reflection is actually about something about them.
yes.
And it's very important to recognize people who reflect you in a way that is very helpful to you.
Yes.
And when people reflect you in a way that isn't helpful to you, that's a bit of a sign of like, that's probably not someone you want to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah.
And you will know in your gut who those people are.
Oh, completely, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's really, it's only about you when you really make it about you, right? Yeah.
Well, and yeah, exactly. So if somebody, yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm not sure that one's going to come to me in the moment, but I just know that if you say, say you share some idea and someone makes an assumption
Mhm.
about the idea or about you because of what you said, and you know that that assumption isn't correct, and that'll make you feel bad, and you'll want to rise to the occasion and be like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And that's not,
Yeah.
at times you're going to do that. And in other times you can just sit back and be like, hmm,
Yeah. Yeah.
because really their interpretation is about them, not about you.
Totally true. Totally true. I love that. I love that we have the ability to know these things and to make them work to our advantage, so that
Yeah.
we're not in this like clueless, letting life happen to us default mode all the time. This is about taking our power back and knowing that in each moment we have a choice.
Yeah, and I really think that I know for myself, every time when I experience anything in life where I feel centered, so I feel solid in myself,
Mm.
I'm not judging what's around me, I'm not looking for anything around me, I'm simply being present, then I experience everything in a very different way.
So different. One of my favorite sayings for a little while was nothing needs to be different. And it came on the heels of we were on vacation. We had rented this house on the beach and one of our daughters couldn't be there. And,
Hmm.
throughout the trip, you start thinking things like, she should be here for this. And
Oh,
instead of doing that, I kept saying, nothing needs to be different. And that
uh,
completely and radically changed my experience there. Because when
yeah.
we miss people and we feel like things are not the way they're supposed to be, then we're really cheating the present moment. So,
Yeah, you're creating strife that
yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
unnecessary and nothing you can do to
right.
change it. So it's that radical acceptance, I guess, right?
Yeah, and that's so true. And this brings to mind a friend recently who has had a ferry that he takes has been regularly late and it's just driving him bonkers.
Not
And
working.
and every time we talked about it, and I finally said, I'm like, I really understand. Like that sounds so frustrating, but is there anything you can do about that? And
Yeah,
he's like, no. And
yeah,
then I'm like, okay, so what's your reframe? Like, how do you shift the way you're looking at it? And he's like, well, I could take an earlier ferry, but then I'm going to have all this time before I need to be at work. And I'm like, okay, well, what could you do with that time?
right.
How does that time serve you? And just by introducing the possibility of looking at it from another perspective, especially with something that you have zero control over, you
Yes.
cannot control a ferry schedule, it just opens up possibilities.
Yeah.
And possibilities create, in my experience, possibilities create satisfaction and fulfillment.
Totally. And it's taking them out of the perspective of I don't want to. I don't want to. And it's like, well, what if we could find a way for you want to? What if that
Right.
earlier fairy just created so much peace and calm for you that it would open up an
Yeah.
avenue to, I don't know, do something creative or have time for
Yeah.
meditation or just really taking back your life from this situation so that you can create it how you want to create it, because we're always focused on what we don't want, right?
Yeah, because if you're sitting there, so if you start out your day enraged because the ferry's late, and then you're going to be get
Oh,
to work a little later than you want and whatever, like what an awful way to start.
yeah,
But if you go early, like okay, yeah, maybe gotta go to bed a little earlier or whatever, but you can start your day in a much better way. And
yeah,
so yeah, there can be gifts in choosing to shift how you go through something.
I love that. I love that. Well, Maria, this was amazing, and I know we
Oh,
could
thank
talk
you.
forever.
We could.
We
I'm
will.
sure we could.
And we will. I'm sure that we'll
Yeah,
have more shows. I'll be on your show later in the
absolutely.
next year, right? I'll be on your show next
Yeah,
year. But I definitely want to have a revisit because this is I love the way we kind of go back and forth with each other and we give different
absolutely.
perspectives. Like I love the way you
Yeah,
think and it was
thank
just
you.
an absolute pleasure. So Maria Finch, she is Silence the Mind Clock. Look for her podcast. It's super brilliant. Obviously, we have connected in a special way, and I am truly grateful for you. So thank you for
Oh,
being here.
thank you, Golden. It is totally my honor to be here, and I loved our conversation.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Love y'all. Peace out.